Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Alter Your Health Live, your source of information and inspiration to promote the holistic transformation of your health and the health of our planet. I'm Dr. Benjamin Alter.
I'm co-host Dr. Susanna Alter.
And we're really happy and excited to be with you here today. Now tuning in from just outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico. Hopefully our connection via technology is okay. Hopefully we've got enough signal to be streaming and connecting, but we'll just go with the flow.
Yeah. And why are we here in Santa Fe?
We're here in Santa Fe because we're meeting up with a couple of new friends today and tomorrow, interviewing a couple of people for the Alter Your Health podcast. So these episodes that I'll be recording today and tomorrow will be released a few weeks into the future.
Are you going to say who they are or keep that a secret?
I can say who they are.
Yeah.
They're with a couple of new people I haven't met yet, but I'm very grateful to be connected with Dr. Joan Borisenko and Dr. Larry Dossi, two pioneers in the field of mind-body medicine, really. And I have really looked up to and respected them, and I've had the opportunity to meet them in person and sit down and record a conversation. So that's what we're doing in New Mexico, ultimately.
Yeah. And I feel like their areas of expertise, this mind-body connection, is what has been on our mind the last few days. And so it's what we're going to talk about today as well. And specifically, we're going to talk about your innate well-being, or in another word I like to put it as well, your innate perfection. And there'll be a lot of words that we'll be using, a lot of terms we'll be using for the same concept today, but we'll start it off with that. And you may hear a little meow in the background. That's because Winnie's here on our journey to Santa Fe, so she's saying hello.
Yeah.
But so how do I want to start out this conversation about our innate well-being?
Well, I think maybe starting from last weekend, Susanna and I were sitting down we're continuing to learn always, but we're enrolled in a course called the Soul-Centered Series. And this is a 6-month program, 1 weekend a month, where we kind of dive into this understanding called the 3 principles.
Mm-hmm.
And these 3 principles point us in the direction of our innate well-being.
Mm-hmm.
So over the last weekend, we kind of had the experience of connecting with our innate well-being, and we're all, and I think this conversation is about how we are all always connected to that,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just our awareness and our realization, the actualization of that connection.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and so I think, a lot of us have experienced this innate well-being or this innate wisdom in times of like a kind of a thunderclap experience of an insight. And it seems like this big grand revelation. And yes, that is certainly like the inner wisdom coming forward and just like piercing through all of the uncertainties, insecurities, whatever it is that's going on in your mind. But I also really want to focus on how this innate well-being it can also show up in really kind of ordinary ways throughout our day. And but I guess before we go into that, I think what really helps kind of like ground this idea of what is this innate well-being is by talking about personal experiences where we were very aware of that innate well-being. So Ben, do you want to share an experience where you really felt just you were in touch with the innate well-being?
It's funny because we were reflecting on things that we might want to share in this conversation, and nothing came to mind, but immediately when you asked me if I'd like to share something, the first thing that came to mind was an experience that I had while I was traveling abroad in India. And Wow, I don't want to get too wrapped up in the story, but I was traveling in India and I had a blister on my foot that was becoming really kind of achy and infected and super inflamed, and it was just getting worse and worse by the day. And I was like, man, this is really not looking or feeling good. And I went to bed one night and I just kind of, I was actually staying in an ashram, in a very holy city, and I was around a lot of kind of high vibrational energy and feeling really connected in a good space mentally, emotionally, spiritually, despite my physical issue. And I went to bed and I woke up, I think it was, in the middle of the night with just this really clear knowing like, I've got to get the heck out of here. I got to go home. I've got to go into, get to a setting where this issue, this physical issue, can be addressed and cared for, um, with modern medicine and like this, what we sometimes take for granted in our culture, in our country.
Mm.
So I decided to like change my plans and book a flight back just a couple days later, back to the US. And by the time I got on the plane, on that flight, I could barely walk. I was in so much pain. My foot was so inflamed. And by the time I got off the plane, the transcontinental traveling, which was like 20 hours of traveling, by the time I got back to the United States, I was severely infected. I had like sepsis, and the infection had made its way into my bloodstream. And I went to like directly to the emergency room, and the doctor said, "Man, like if it were maybe another day or so, you might have had to say goodbye to your foot." You know, so that
Oh man.
so obviously like I kind of caught it, and I didn't really think in the moment like, man, I better do something about this or else I'm going to lose my foot. I was just really connected to my wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because this conversation is about connection with our innate well-being, and obviously in that moment, with my severe infection on my foot, I wasn't necessarily physically connected with that innate well-being, like I was sick.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, deeper, beyond, like at the level underneath the physical, I was very much aligned and connected with my innate well-being.
Yeah.
So
I
so
think it's a beautiful,
so it's a good story and a
beautiful
good
story.
good example of how this, where we're talking about the innate well-being, it spans well beyond the physical. In fact, it starts, we like to talk about how it starts at the core of who we are
Mm-hmm.
spiritually, in the oneness, connected to all things. And then it arises from that to affect our spiritual sense of self, our mental and emotional wellness.
Mm-hmm.
And our physical wellness is just like kind of a byproduct of that bubbling up
Mm-hmm.
innate well-being, the wellspring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the term Larry Dossey uses, actually, a little sneak preview for a few weeks out, is this one mind that we're all sharing. We all have our own personal minds, but then we can tap into this one mind, this greater mind that is just this like infinite, expansive wisdom. And another metaphor I really like when thinking about this one mind or this innate well-being or wisdom is this well, this deep well that contains this, this wisdom, this purity that, again, we can all tap into at any moment, and we're always connected to it. So you don't actually have to do anything to get connected to it, because it's always there. And we keep using this word inherent, and it's because it's true. You carry it with you wherever you go. And yeah, so I think that's a great story.
Yeah. How about you? Would you like to piggyback on mine with your story?
It's funny because I feel like the more we talk about it, the more I'm like, I remember these memories, like, oh, that was my wisdom. That was my, that was me being connected to the one mind. And the story that's present right now in my mind is kind of similar to yours, but it showed up in a very different way. you just heard this story the other day, Ben, but I was climbing with a friend, ice climbing with a friend in college, and we were in Vail, Colorado. We drove up in the morning and did one route in the morning, and then we're driving down the highway to find our next route, our next frozen waterfall. And we wanted to go to this one famous route called the Fang, which is called the Fang because it's this frozen, like you can climb around it 360 the entire way. And we just thought, oh, it'd be so cool if we climbed the Fang. So we had a hard time finding it, first of all. But when we found it, we were both sitting in the car and looking at it, this beautiful ice formation. And we looked at each other and we're like, okay, so are we going to do this? We're looking at this, hike ahead of us. And we both just kind of said to each other, like, you know what? I'm kind of done here. Like, I just kind of want to go back home and rest. And, like, it was very unlike us because we're both very kind of ambitious climbers. And we both honestly felt like a little bit lazy, but we decided, like, no, let's just go home. We even considered just going to, like, watch other climbers climb it and sit nearby and cheer them on, but we decided, no, let's go home. And the next day, we were sitting in class, and he's on this climbing blog and reads this update that the previous day, yesterday, at 3:30, which was, like, right when we would have been there, the Fang collapsed, and the ice climbers, they were both, the two climbers that were there were alive, but they were in the hospital. And yeah, it was just one of those moments of like, whoa, here I thought this was laziness, but actually it was like, at that time I called it a guardian angel, which I think is another term you can use for it.
Mm-hmm.
But it really was. It was our wisdom shining through, and in a way we wouldn't normally think it would shine through. So yeah, so
Yeah.
that was one moment that,
Yeah.
came to mind for me. It's not always coming to rescue from impending doom, though, I think the stories we're sharing are
Right.
like a little dramatic in that sense.
Yeah, it's nice to remember that this wisdom is always shining through in the most mundane, ordinary, day-to-day moments.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously when we're busy thinking about this and that and what we need to do and getting to our appointments on time and what are we going to eat for lunch and dinner, like that, there's so much noise up here that the innate wellspring of well-being, just we're not that connected with our awareness is distracted,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak.
Yeah.
So yeah, these are great examples, and there's so many that we could share. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure for you listening out there, I'm sure you could maybe think of plenty of times that this wisdom shines through in your own life, and you connected with this inherent driving force to motivate you to choose one way or another. Or, I like to think it's the same force, the same energy that's just creating wellness in our life. So if we're, sick, if we're feeling, coming down with some sort of illness or infection or something, it's the same. I like to think that it's the same force that heals us is the force that
Mm-hmm.
allows us the insight and guidance to choose how to heal,
Exactly. Yeah, and in naturopathic medicine, one of the first things we learn about is the philosophy of naturopathic medicine. And one of the principles is that this idea that the body heals itself. They call it the term the vis medicatrix naturae in Latin.
The healing power of nature.
The innate healing power of nature. And, this idea that if you fall and scrape your knees, your skin will heal itself. And it's like, we never learned how to heal our skin. It just does that.
You never think like, what's the best process for skin healing? What do we need to do to heal our skin? Our skin is healing.
There's things we can do nutritionally to support that process, but it's going to do its, it's going to
nothing
do it on
to
its
learn.
own. Nothing to
learn.
learn. And it's the same when we think about mental wellness too, actually. That you know, the body is the self-healing organism, and so is, you know, that translates to our mental well-being as well.
Absolutely. And that's been kind of what's the word for revolutionary for me personally, because I feel like I've been really kind of steeped in all of these different practices and you know, practical meditation techniques and, you know, visualizations and affirmations and positive thoughts and these kind of things. And it's important, and it's just been revolutionary to open up to the fact that there is nothing that I or anyone else needs to do to connect with the inherent well-being that we are always connected with.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a matter of quieting the noise, you know, like we're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
which can take the form of a meditation, or it can take the form of a walk in the park,
right,
or it can take the form of, you know, a dinner with a loved one, but it doesn't have to take any of those forms. It's not the outside creating that. It's always inherently happening within.
Yes. Yeah. And I feel like, so in my life, some of the most profound kind of insights or just flashes of wisdom I received happened when I was in kind of a more meditative state. Two of them happened right after a yoga studio. One of them happened while I was, you know, chanting mantras, and you know, it can be easy for the mind to latch on to this belief, like, oh,
it was the mantra.
It was the mantra, or it was the yoga, but really, like,
yeah, not to take any power away from mantra, or not to, you know, diminish the value of yoga, but what we're talking about has nothing to do with mantra yoga.
Mm-hmm.
The yoga and mantra are great, you know, practices and can be fun, but there is absolutely no practical tool or skill or anything, if we can say it enough, that is required to connect with the inherent well-being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
yeah.
I mean, I think it comes down to just simply understanding how the mind works, how the one mind is there, and how our thoughts play into all of that. Because when Ben's talking about all this noise up here, he's talking about the thoughts that come in and wreak havoc if we take them too seriously, or, you know, if a negative self-limiting thought pattern comes into our head and we choose to believe that and take that seriously, then that's going to lead to a lot of, you know, actions that maybe are not going to serve you. So
it's important, you know, taking a step even preceding the negative thoughts. How about just the fact that thoughts are nothing good or bad, negative or positive? They're just waves of energy that are always flowing through us. And you've probably heard that there's, you know, you know, a lot of spiritual teachings and meditative techniques don't tell you to control your thoughts because they know better. There's absolutely no way of controlling thoughts, but observing thoughts. And if we take it maybe a step further, it's observing that thoughts are nothing that except for just energy waves, or you don't even have to use the word energy, just, you know, impulses arising and falling. And they don't carry any quality. It's our brains, beyond, it's not our minds, but the brain, like the conscious thinking thing inside of our skull, that labels these thoughts as good or bad or ugly or pretty. And then we, you know, go follow that thought down whatever rabbit hole it leads us into, some experience or some emotion or feeling.
Yeah, and I think also another tendency is to see these thoughts as like, oh, this is part of me. This is, you know, this is that you really personalize the thought. Like, this is my thought. What's wrong with me for having this thought? I need to fix this. And And really, no. It's like it's not you. You are not your thoughts, and your thoughts are not you. Thoughts are merely passing through your awareness, and what you decide to do with them, that's up to
Yeah.
you.
And that brings
So,
us to the idea of us being powerful creators. We've got these thoughts and it's like, what are we going to create with them? How are we gonna like use them, or at least like not use them? That's to me, it's very an empowering kind of idea to consider that, holy cow, like all of these thoughts are swarming through, but it's up to me to do something with them or not, or let them go. you know
yeah. And I think at the same time though, it's like, I want to hold on to this idea. Well, that's funny that I said I want to hold on to this idea. Oh, and there's Ellen Friedman. She's like the expert of this topic. But I feel like, I don't know, I feel like, what you're saying is like, how what oh, this pressure of like, what do I do? What do I
I
do with these?
didn't use the word pressure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess.
Empowered, like create. There's so much creativity. That's where like our creative, inspiration comes from this, you know, infinite potential of thought
Mhm.
and what we do with it or what we don't do with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we're getting to about 20 minutes here.
Yeah.
So I don't want to go on too long, but maybe because, our podcast is about health.
It is.
How can we tie this in with with one's physical health?
How can't we tie it in? I mean,
In a practical sense.
in a practical sense, well, actually, what my mom always talks about, who happens to be tuning in on Facebook, she talks about our physical symptoms as being, you know, I'm using my words to describe what she says, but our physical symptoms are merely kind of a reflection of our thinking. What our connection with our physical symptoms can be similar to that with our thoughts, in that we can let it go and we can loosen the hold that it has on us. And then that leads us to freedom. Freedom from the, we say that pain can be part of all sorts of processes, but suffering, what we do with that pain, how long we endure the pain, and what we make the pain mean, that is kind of up to us.
Mm-hmm.
And we can choose, you can't really necessarily choose out of the pain sometimes, but we can choose to lessen our connection with the pain. So Ellen says we are experiencing our symptoms through thoughts. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Quite simply, we are experiencing our symptoms through thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and the other thing that comes to mind for me is I think I've been thinking about this idea of how like our patients and clients have as much inner wisdom as anyone else in the world, and here in this medical system we have this way of how patients come to the doctor to seek advice about what do I do with my health, and and I think that it's obviously like that will continue, and that's an important process, but I guess I'm bringing this up because I want to kind of empower all the listeners to understand that you are so much more wise than you really realize you are. Like you at any point in time, you have this ability to tap into this wisdom about what to do, how to move forward with this healing process. And it may be to go seek out a professional's opinion, and then how you respond to their opinion. Going to a doctor doesn't mean that what they say is necessarily like the truth or what is best for you.
Yeah, in fact, it's probably very healthy and empowering to go to the doctor with just the opposite kind of framework and just seeing the doctor as another source of information and wisdom, but not the ultimate source of information and wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
So, how your inherent wisdom, inherent well-being meets the doctor's wisdom and what you do with that.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not the end all be all what comes out of the doctor's mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think on the headline of the podcast page, alter.health/podcast, I have, "You are your own healer. Let me show you how." Because I truly believe that you are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's our mission, is to empower people and, awaken or just point people in the direction of their own inner healer.
Mm-hmm.
Because quite frankly, I know this probably isn't the best for business purposes, but we don't want to work with anyone for the rest of their lives. We want to work with people for a short duration of time, during which time they are connected with that inherent well-being, empowered to choose a life and nutrition and relationships and thoughts that are productive and create more health and well-being on a sustainable sort of way. So it's not this, like, we do not want to have this relationship where your health is dependent on us or any other health professional.
Right. Yeah. Well said, Ben. Yeah.
And on that note, we still are in the month of October offering 25% off
If
you're
your
interested.
wisdom is guiding you to our services, it would be an honor for us to support you and guide you towards, realizing your own innate wisdom. So,
Yes, what she said.
yeah.
So thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Ellen, for your wisdom. We are experiencing our symptoms through our thoughts. So just hang on to that and remember that.
Ponder that for a moment.
And I guess that's about it for now in tuning out from Santa Fe, New Mexico. Next time we'll be back in California next Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm excited to share these upcoming podcasts that are not the live episodes, but we've got some good stuff coming. So tune in at alter.health/podcast. And until next time,
Bye.
peace and love. Bye-bye.